I actually just recently wrote a post for our blog looking at the gig economy.
Oh, yeah.
Changing, quite bizarre evolution of people taking short-term contracts, outsourcing. You've got all of these different models for online freelancing, and I'm sure you're very aware of those. And in this article, one of the things that I actually quoted in that little text was you talking a lot about how people skills are kind of the biggest single rising factors in hiring, especially regarding, I think you did this IBM, I believe, the C-suite study, looking at this paradoxical situation where you have on one hand the rise of the desire for people skills and maybe the soft skills that entails, with at the same time almost reversed focused on teams. So on one hand, we've done away with the very stable, structured career models with teams based on yearly performance reviews to this kind of agile teaming structure. Perhaps I just want to hear your sort of ideas on how this is going to play out over the next 5 years.
I completely view it as a paradox. Yeah, and the paradox of, on the one hand, teaming skills, collaborative skills, interpersonal skill, emotional intelligence are seen as, and I think rightly so, more important than ever in today's workplace. And this is in part because there's more need for cross-functional, cross-expertise teamwork than ever. That's vital to innovation, full stop. The paradox is, at the same time, we have the rise of the so-called gig economy, where people are more and more lone rangers or sole operators and kind of signing up to do modular tasks on their own. And what I think is we're starting to see happen is that the gig economy works for some kinds of work, but not others. And it could sadly give rise to a kind of a two-class system where some people have a sense of belonging and inclusion and collaborative teamwork and great colleagues and meaningful work, and other people are in a position of sort of scrambling to get their next task, don't have health benefits, at least in the US. They don't have kind of backup plan or a safety net when things go wrong. And they're almost necessarily not engaging as much in the kind of work that has the meaningful interdependence, which I would argue is more and more important in today's economy.
Yeah, so it's almost like a two-paced system. And,
yes.
And one of the things which I think maybe from, if you want to look at it more of a psychological perspective about creating meaning in workplaces, again, there seems to be this double pull. On one hand, we're being told that we should be working in tribes, that we should be working in small groups that facilitate meaningful relationships and interpersonal relationships. But at the same time, we're also being told that we're going to contract out half of the work in the organization to freelancers. So how are we going to bridge that gap?
I don't think we have any clear answers right now. I think we're going to be muddling through for a while. We're going to be doing what I would think of as execution as learning, where we're trying to make this work. We're stumbling and failing in various small and large ways, and then we course correct. We learn from it. But I think it's a given that the need for intense collaboration will continue, because I think the kinds of challenges both within businesses and in society more generally that need to be addressed inherently are multidisciplinary. They inherently require the skill base from multiple and often very deep expert disciplines. I don't think it's a given that the gig economy will expand to fill every kind of role. I think it may have to plateau out once it's filled all the kinds of roles that are modular tasks. And by modular, I mean reasonably low or at least clearly articulatable interfaces with other tasks.
Right.
And so if you can give me I need this report written, right, and I can go home and do it by myself at my keyboard, I can do that kind of work. But if you want me on a complex innovation team where we're generating subtle options, we're assessing them, we're needing each other's expertise to do this work, that's not outsourceable. And it's going to require HR organizations to be even more deeply expert than they currently are on the nature of the work, right? On the kind of work that needs to be done what skills it takes, what interfaces, what contingencies it requires. That's, they're going to have to understand the work really well to be adequate consultants internally and externally in filling those roles.
How much do you think HR as a function itself is going to have to evolve to deal with this evolution in the actual economy itself? Perhaps it's time for HR to also adopt some of the same mechanics in terms of agility, in terms of constant learning, keeping up with all the new technology that's out there. So what are the types of skills HR people are going to need in order to actually help the business through this economic period?
I think HR executives are in many ways a mirror of the economy. I mean, they must mirror the same kinds of skills, at least on the interpersonal and human side, as the people that we increasingly need to hire into organizations. So a greater and greater need for HR folks to be kind of somewhat visionary, looking out ahead, what's on the horizon, to be thinking about people's needs for meaning, people's needs for skill development and other kinds of development, and to be true partners with the other executive leaders in the organization.
At the moment, I see a lot of fear, I guess, in the market about what's happening, and fear, as we know, tends to drive bad decisions. I guess people and the people out there who maybe are having these constant short-term contracts come and go, that there's some kind of increased stability that comes from this, because I think, as we can all agree, it's not an ideal way to have a comfortable living.
I think that's actually really important, what you just said, because it is, as I said earlier, it's not a given that this will just continue linearly in the direction we've seen it go, meaning the gig economy, or the increase in gig workers. Because what I have learned from some reading, from some interviews, is that initially people really love and value the freedom, and they love the choice. They can make their own, I can pick this job and not that job. And then what happens is, over time, they realize, it's lonely. There isn't that, part of what those of us who have roles in organizations really value about our work is that wonderful social system, that network of colleagues who care about some of the same things that we care about. And so, one, it's lonely, and they begin to realize I've cut myself off from part of a meaningful adult work life. Number two, it's fearful, as you said. It's over time. There's always that anxiety. Where does the next paycheck come from? Where does the next job come from? You're only as hireable as your last job's ratings give you. So it's a very uncertain and anxious situation to be, which is counterbalancing the freedom and the choice. But over decades, we're living longer, we're healthier. I mean, is this really a viable, meaningful, and developmentally valid way to live through a long career? I think for some it is, but not for all.
Just sort of to wrap things up, I wanted to just quickly ask you about a little bit about what you've called the knowledge economy, because for me it seems the knowledge economy is very much leaning towards this kind of very flexible gig-like model. What does the knowledge economy actually mean in practice?
Well, I think the modern workplace is knowledge intensive almost no matter where you work, whether you're practicing medicine, writing code, advising clients, building homes, or working in a state-of-the-art factory, that requires sophisticated computer skills to manage the production operation. Mm-hmm. So what the knowledge economy means to me is that more and more of the work people do is truly knowledge intensive. It takes expertise. It's, I understand how this machine works. You don't. You need me. But that does not signify solo knowledge. In fact, I would argue, just as expertise and knowledge has intensified as a source of value, so has interdependence intensified as a source of value, or the need to integrate. As knowledge gets deeper and more expert in silos, problems get more in need of multiple areas, which means we need to find ways to work together. And so I would say people are knowledge workers who nearly always need to collaborate with each other to solve meaningful problems and accomplish work that's perpetually, in a state of flux.